before our hearing because we do have proponent oral testimony and opponent oral testimony. So before we get started with that, I do want us to work on two bills. So let's start off with House Bill 2322. That is the definition of children with disabilities. We had that hearing just earlier this week. Did we have a question, Senator Dietrich? Okay, then I'll call on you to make a motion.
Thank you. I would move, Madam Chair, that we pass out House Bill 2322 favorably.
Okay, do I have a second? I have a second from Senator Gossage. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. I'd now like us to work on House Bill 2080, and that was with regard to state assessments for students attending our virtual schools. Is there a need for an update on that committee? You would like an update? Okay. So if we could have briefly from our reviser, Tamara Lawrence, an update on House Bill 2080.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 2080 would authorize any full-time virtual student that is required to take statewide assessments to do so in a virtual setting.
Okay. Are there questions for the reviser? Seeing none, do I have a motion? Yes, Senator Petty.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment.
Okay. We'll pass that out. Would you like to explain it once it's been passed out, or did you want the reviser to explain it?
I'll let the reviser explain it. Would you mind giving me another copy? Thanks.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you look on page 2, the back page of the balloon, you can see this would just add a new subsection that clarifies that nothing that is in that section would be construed to authorize any student enrolled in a virtual school to take any of their examinations relating to admission to a post-secondary institution in a virtual setting.
So as a point of clarification, on the page 1 of the bill, on line 9, it's actually 8 and 9, when we make reference to statewide assessment required pursuant to KSA 725170, does it go beyond state assessments on 72-5170?
No.
Okay, so this is just saying again that we're on page 2, it says that we're abiding by lines 8 and 9 of page 1. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Senator Petty?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and that's specifically why I asked for this amendment. Of course, this legislation definitely does make a change with our state assessments, but I know that at least when it comes to ACT, that is not allowed at all to be provided, to be taken that way. So I wanted to make sure that we didn't if this passes, that we didn't in the future have, someone might think that does include post-secondary, and this does not.
Okay. Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my understanding is KSDE or the legislature doesn't set how the ACT is administered. The College Entrance Exam Board does. So is that accurate? I don't know who could answer that, but I'm wondering if this is even in our lane. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Exactly my thoughts, Senator Erickson. The ACT is not proctored. It's not given by our public school districts. It is completely a separate entity, and different colleges require different tests. And I think actually what we've seen in recent years is that colleges are even moving away from requiring these test scores prior to admittance.
Okay. I do believe ACT is proctored. It is administered in our schools, but not by our schools, at least I'm not talking about what is available pre-ACT and the ACT that's given for free for our students, but that's not mandated. Senator Sykes.
So I just wanted to clarify because the testing that the state does is in those schools on that testing day. So just making sure that
Right.
this is not causing problems with that.
Okay. So any more discussion, Senator Petty?
Thank you. And Madam Chair, I totally agree. I actually have worked as a proctor for this very thing, for the Blue Valley School District for several years. So I have worked as a proctor, so they are proctored. And I would agree, there is a licensing bureau, a licensing organization for the ACT. Senator Straw is correct. Some are not requiring anymore, but that doesn't mean that our students won't continue to take them. And I would, I think it's important if we do pass this legislation, that it's clear that they are not covered.
Any more discussion on the amendment? So do I have an motion on the amendment?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to move my amendment.
Okay, and a second from Senator Sykes. So I have a motion from Senator Petty, second from Senator Sykes. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, I only heard two voices. Okay, but I only heard two voices. I heard your voice, and I heard an aye and a no. So let's start again. All those in favor, please raise your hand. So 1, 2, 3. Opposed, raise your hand. So, okay, I have 4 in opposition. The amendment fails. Is there any additional amendments that someone would like to introduce on 2080? Seeing none, do I have a motion to pass out House Bill 2080? No. Okay, I have a motion from Senator Gossage. Do I have a second? I have a second from Senator Straub. Any discussion on the bill at this point in time? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, would you like to have that recorded, Senator Petty? Okay, it does appear that House Bill 2080 has passed out favorably. We are now on our hearing and thank you, committee, for that work. We're on our hearing for House Bill 2236, establishing the parent's right to direct the education, upbringing, and moral or religious training of their children, including the right to object to harmful and inappropriate educational materials. As is our tradition, Tamara Lawrence, our reviser, will give us an overview.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee. House Bill 2236 would codify the right of each parent to direct the education, upbringing, and moral or religious training of their child. The bill would allow parents of students enrolled in a school district to object to educational material and activities that are not included in the improved district curriculum or state educational standards, or that the parent believes are harmful to the child or impair the parent's sincerely held beliefs, values, or principles. The parent may withdraw their child from that class or educational program, and the withdrawal could not have an adverse effect on the child's academic record. The bill would also require local boards of education to adopt policies and procedures to guarantee that right established in the bill. Additionally, the bill does provide definitions for relevant terms used throughout the bill, including materials, activities, and parent. The bill would take effect on July 1 upon publication in the statute book, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
We'll start off with Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is new statute. Do you know how many school districts are already doing this, if any?
I can't speak to what school districts are
I
currently.
think our proponents or opponents can testify to that. Do we have a vote from the House, please?
Yes, the House vote was 75 to 47 with 3 absent.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions, committee? Seeing none. Okay, so we have 2 proponents and we have 2, 4, 5 opponents. So at this time, we're going to give everyone 3 minutes to talk. And for those of us that are speaking for the first time, we do have your testimony, so you do not need to read it. Just share with us what it is that you want the committee to know above and beyond what you've written for us. So we'll start off with proponent testimony from Brittany Jones, Director of Policy and Engagement, Kansas Family Voice. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you so much for having me. Chair Baumgardner and members of the committee, my name is Brittany Jones, and I am an attorney and the Director of Policy and Engagement for Kansas Family Voice. At Kansas Family Voice, we believe that children are given to families and to parents, and they're not given to the state. The government, schools, and even the church do not own children, though they may have a very important role in their development and their education. Families are designed to nurture, love, and educate and prepare their children to engage in the world. In the majority of cases, the primary influencer in a child's life is their parent. A parent's God-given and constitutionally recognized right should especially come into play when schools are attempting to expose children to sensitive materials that parents may or may not agree with. This sort of exposure should not happen without a parent's explicit understanding, knowledge, and consent. The Supreme Court has repeatedly affirmed the right of parents to direct the upbringing of their children. HB 2236 merely reaffirms that right that has been recognized multiple times, but most clearly in Pierce versus Society of Sisters and Myers versus Nebraska. The right has also come into play specifically in federal statutes, and there's multiple different statutes that allow parents to review materials, and it affirms their right to direct their child's education. And these rights have also been affirmed in other states who have parental Bill of Rights. Now, in your written testimony today, I believe it's been submitted, and if not, it was submitted in the House, so I don't know if it got into you today, but there's several different parents who have expressed concerns of things that they found in their children's material throughout Kansas. But most recently, we have seen a situation in Wichita where the school district presented materials to teachers about hiding certain information from parents and not allowing not allowing that information to be given to parents. And so that it's a concern for Kansas parents. It's a concern for Kansas families. Now, I want to be very clear, this bill is not an attack on teachers. I personally have a lot of friends who are teachers and in the school system. They have a very difficult job. They do a lot of very hard work, and they are committed to their profession, and we honor them for that. But this bill is to help rebalance sometimes the inequities in power that parents feel when they're dealing with the school system. So we strongly encourage you to pass this bill to reaffirm parents' rights to direct their children's upbringing and to direct their children's education, and I ask that you pass this bill out favorably. Thank you. And I stand open for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Next, we have Amy Covey, Vice President, Lansing USD 469 School Board. Amy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As mentioned, my name is Amy Covey. I'm from Lansing School Board. I'm a vice president there, but I'm speaking on my own behalf, not as the board as a whole, as I come to you today. Thank you. One of the main reasons I wanted to testify is my own personal experience with this. We, last year, as a board, passed our own Parents' Bill of Rights after the other Parents' Bill of Rights was vetoed by Governor Kelly. And so we have had that in action for almost a year now. And in that Bill of Rights, it affirms the parents, like as mentioned, their right to direct the upbringing of their children. And we respect that. And it also allows each parent to be able to challenge their curriculum like the state's and remove them from that assignment if necessary. And we have had since then a curriculum challenge at our district. We've successfully managed that. We've dealt with this on a individual level with parents, and they did not always have that voice. And even though we have that Parents' Bill of Rights, I myself, as a board member on occasion, have still met resistance when asking for certain curriculum from our administrators. If I have that problem on the board, imagine how a parent feels. This state law, I believe, to affirm this is needed. If we do not do that, some of the arguments you may hear today are that local school boards like ourselves could handle this on their own, but not every parent has a school board member or a majority on a school board that is willing to do that. But every single parent of a child in our public school systems retains this right. So that's why I feel the statute is needed. And I really wanted to come here and speak to you about this because we are I am a proponent, a huge proponent of public schools, but we're losing students. And we're losing students because this is not being honored. So if we do not want to honor and speak up for these students, then that's going to continue to happen. And unfortunately, the students that are going to fall through the cracks are the ones that can't either physically have the ability to homeschool their students or the monetary methods to be able to send them to a private school. So that's why I think this is needed. You may hear from other members stating that this is not needed. I have heard, for instance, our district is a member of the Kansas Association of School Boards, and I have heard different testimony or possibly online mentions about different bills that they are opposed to. But for some reason, I must not be on the mailing list because I have never been asked my opinion. And when it's stated that board members oppose something or that they don't want something, I just wanted to make that known. So I appreciate your time, and I'm here to take any questions at the appropriate moment.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Amy. I do want to point out to the committee that we do have 2 proponent written-only testimonies from Mike O'Neill, Kansas Policy Institute, and from Lucretia Nold, Policy Specialist for the Kansas Catholic Conference. Committee, let's just go ahead and open up questions for our 2 proponents. We'll start with Senator Straub, and then we'll go to Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Amy. This question's for you. Thank you so much for your service as a school board member and for taking things into your own hands when the legislative process may not have worked. Are you able to give us a copy of the Parents' Bill of Rights that your school district passed?
Yes, I would love to. I can submit that.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Senator Sykes.
Thank you. My question is for you as well, Amy. I know there was a situation in Lansing last year with a student, and can you share with us, it's my understanding that there was a student, they were given an alternate option. They were not required to do that option, and then continue to fight against that program even though they were not being required. And then I think the school district pulled that curriculum even though they were not being required to do it. So can you comment on that a little bit?
I can comment some on that, some of the confidentiality with either the evaluative measures, with the staff or the private information with the parent, I can't. But that parent had objected to some material that she filed that complaint that went to our school administrators. Then that went to a committee. They forwarded their information back to our board, and we decided at that time that the materials, they didn't provide us with any alternatives, but they decided at that time that they wanted to keep that unit, and we voted as a board to remove what was a 5-week unit on social justice and an English language class. We decided to remove that because of the many materials that were in that were objectionable. But speaking to the parent, she did ask for an alternative assignment, which wasn't readily given at first. And then when she had to be removed from the classroom per her parent, was sent to another area of the building. For 5 weeks, she worked on some other assignments at that point. But the loss of learning, of not being in the classroom, there was an alternative assignment given, but again, she was removed for that long time period. And because it was such a it was full of so many controversial issues, we decided that a 5-week section on that was just too much. And so as a board, we decided to remove that. What we have since tried to put in place is when there are such controversial issues, the teachers, we're hoping now, will have an assignment readily available for that student. This took time, loss of learning, so it's a learning process here at Lansing. We've only had this since last year. And another issue that we are addressing with that, so the parent can look, see, like my daughter is a senior. If she was going to take that English language class in the second semester of high school, as a parent, what I would like is them to be able to look at that assignment online prior to that, or not that assignment, that course, I'm sorry, that syllabus. So at Lansing, what we've developed is called a Guaranteed Viable Curriculum. We call it GVC. And our teacher and learning director has helped tremendously put that into place. And what that'll be is an online portal that any parent can access. You can look at, you can see what materials would be used in that class, how it applies to the Kansas state standards, and be able to also pull up any supplementals. Because sometimes you're teaching something that's in the standard, but you're pulling supplementals from YouTube or various sources, which happened in this case with that challenge, that maybe the parent might object to. So the parents will be better prepared, I guess is what I want to say, going into that, to hopefully prevent that from happening. Because one of the biggest problems I had with that was that 5-week loss of learning.
If I may, I appreciate that, and from my conversations with people involved in that, that the assignment was given before. It was not a loss of learning. It was a different option, and they were still learning. They were not in the classroom. I think that actually, and it was a social justice. I looked at those items that were presented, and they are speaking to empathy. And I think the students in the classroom who were learning from those materials that the child did not, or the parents did not approve of, I think it was actually an opportunity for empathy, both in what the kids were learning in the curriculum, but also the empathy for someone who was out of the classroom learning elsewhere. And so I'm having kind of a hard time understanding when they were given an option. Maybe it wasn't everyone was involved in that learning, but my kids have been pulled out of the classroom and had assignments, and completely not allowing someone else or one person to be able to say what is not available for everyone else, which I think, as I've looked at those, they are very appropriate for seniors. Thank you.
Excuse me. We had a board action, and if we're going to respect local control, the board voted on this. We're not going to backseat quarterback it. So, Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Amy, thanks for being here today and serving on your school board.
Is your mic on?
Yeah, it is. Maybe I'm just not close enough. Sorry. In your testimony, you mentioned about losing students because this is not being honored. And so I'm having a hard time understanding that.
Sure. One of the reasons why I put that in there, when I first ran for school board, I was knocking on a lot of doors, met a lot of parents. One of those parents specifically, she has 5 children that would be eligible for our district. They moved to our school district for the schools out of another area. Once they were in the schools, her daughter, this was about 2 years ago, experienced some of the same issues at our high school, where she was not able to receive that alternative assignment. So I understand, I do agree with you, Senator Sykes, that this is at least providing that opportunity. And you're right, she did receive that other assignment. I just want to try to make it more readily available to prevent any delays. But for instance, in that case, because she could not get that handled on the administrator level, and then another issue at the middle school level, she has since been homeschooling now those 5 children. So, and that, I have spoke to many parents in the area who have taken out 1 or 2 of their children or more because of that issue. So then there goes that funding from our local schools too. And I think we can achieve a great educational outcome that exceeds the Candace standards without having some of the other items in there. And like Senator Sykes said, it may be an issue that it doesn't necessarily need to be removed from the classroom. It's not that objectionable. But as long as this bill would help assure that there would be an alternative assignment provided and no academic, it wouldn't diminish their academic record if the parents request that.
Just as a follow-up.
Sure.
So, I mean, one thing, this and so many things are talking about parental rights, and you just expressed it, a parental right to decide to homeschool. And I also heard in your testimony, it almost sounded, which was a little disconcerting, it sounded like as a board member that you were promoting private school and homeschooling. Would I?
No, that's why I was mentioning that if we don't honor this, that more people are going to end up doing it, and that's fine if that's what they choose. But what I want is our public schools to be the best that they can be. My husband served in the military for 26 years, and in that time we traveled all around the country, and our kids had to switch schools all the time, and I know how important it is for those kids to go to their local schools and to be with their neighbors in class. That's why I volunteer all my time at the public school doing this. I am a huge
as a board member that would be the reason too.
I'm sorry?
I was hoping a board member, you're on a public school board, and so
Yeah, oh yeah.
promoting, but I did hear that in your testimony, so it was very concerning to me.
Oh, no, I
to hear it
understand.
that way. Thank you.
Yeah, I just know of that incident, that individual incident, so where it's removing funds from the school because of that.
Could you share with us the GVCs, the Guaranteed Viable Curriculum? Is that something that is being utilized in other school districts, or is that something that was unique to Lansing
I
developing?
believe it's in other school districts because our teaching and learning curriculum director brought that in from another. I could also send that with our Parents' Bill of Rights in case you're interested in that. It would be great, I think, because parents moving into the district or looking at classes around this time, you're going to start helping your high schooler fill out their schedule for next year. You can look at that. And it can also, in a way, help the teachers. Because if the parents can look at this and see that maybe that's course, that's maybe something not so good for our family, let's opt for a different one. By seeing those items, then it can prevent a lot of drama at the end.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other hands, so we are going to move on to our opponent oral testimony.
Thank you.
We are going to start with Dr. Mary Sinclair, Kansas Advocacy Team, the Parent Teacher Association. Mary, I understand you are with us on WebEx.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can, and we're sticking to the 3-minute rule for everyone that's going to be providing testimony.
I'll keep it brief. Madam Chair, thank you, and committee members. Appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of the Kansas PTA. I think it's worth spending a couple of our 3 minutes just reminding folks that PTA is the oldest and largest volunteer child advocacy association in the United States. Our member organization has been focused on the promotion of family engagement and homeschool partnerships for the past century. Kansas PTA actively supports the rights of parents to direct the education, upbringing, moral, or religious training of their children. However, we find the application of these stated rights in House Bill 2236 to be particularly problematic. The PTA supports meaningful partnerships between parents and educators, which includes respecting the roles, complaint policies, and due process rights of all parties. This bill is not that. How could this bill do anything but devalue the accredited Kansas high school diploma when the bill states that no student's academic record shall be adversely affected by withdrawal from a class or educational program? Kansas high school graduates could be unfairly perceived as less than ready for college and career compared to their peers across the country. It is unclear how Kansas parents could expect their children to be treated fairly and held to uniform standards under the terms of this bill. One student's course load could be made significantly lighter compared to their peers by virtue of one parent's withdrawal or a couple of parents' withdrawal from assignments and components of coursework. Consistency and equity would be nearly impossible to uphold. This bill disregards the constitutional authority granted to the members of the state and local boards of education that we as parents and patrons freely elect. I'd also like to draw attention to a list of over a dozen curriculum and graduation requirements that were added or codified into state law by this legislative body. This bill makes no mention of these explicit legislative priorities like 323231 Character Development Program, 3233 Celebrate Freedom Week, 3237 Disability Awareness and Anti-Bullying, which are grounded in concepts of inclusion, equity, and diversity. Kansas PTA strongly urges members of this committee to vote no on this bill to uphold the Kansas Constitution, to protect the value of the Kansas diploma. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Mary. Next up, we have Scott Rothschild, Communications Editor for the Kansas Association of School Boards. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Scott Rothschild with the Kansas Association of School Boards. All districts in Kansas are members of our association. Our school board members absolutely support building strong partnerships with parents, which is one of the State Board of Education's Kansans Can goals. Most of our members become involved in school boards because they are parents, because they are grandparents, because they have connections to students or former students. They are your neighbors, you see them in the grocery stores, they are very involved in the community. So why do we appear in opposition to this bill? We are concerned about language that says if a parent withdraws their child from a class or program, then the student's academic records cannot be adversely affected by that withdrawal. We believe that language would allow students to withdraw from a core class such as science or English with no requirement to learn any coursework through an alternative assignment. With the assistance of our legal staff, we would recommend additional language to continue the sentence, and it's in lines 18 and 20. Lines 18 and 20, I'll just read it. No student's academic records shall be adversely affected by withdrawal from a class or educational program pursuant to this section. And the added language that we would recommend is, however, exemptions from required instruction granted pursuant to this section do not excuse a student from the responsibility to complete alternative assignments offered to attain credit in the course, the total semester hours required for attendance, or required courses for graduation. KSB has many policies that mirror the same rights that are in this bill, and I've added just one of those, and I probably put in too much there, but if you look at the written copy and go down to challenges of materials, I think you'll see what our policy is that we recommend to school boards, and it's very similar to, I think, what was talked about. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jim Carlskent with the USA's United Schools Administrators of Kansas. Welcome back, Jim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to be here, and thank you, committee. There's been a lot said, and I know we're kind of under a time crunch, but I am Jim Carlskin. I'm representing United School Administrators and also a group of schools called Schools for Quality Education, smaller rural schools out in the western part of the state. I've been a high school principal and a superintendent for 3 decades, and the situation we're talking about is, parents challenging the curriculum of what goes on in a class. That happens all the time. As when I was in the business, it was not infrequent to deal with that, and it needs to be worked on. We certainly respect parents, and their right to guide their children. We are not opposed to this. We are certainly in support of it. Ms. Sinclair and Mr. Rothschild brought up some concerns that we have, since the bill was heard in the House, it was about a month ago, I've had several high school administrators contact me regarding specifically things around eligibility, because if a student is not held accountable to their coursework, and then there's no negative, consequence, coaches who have eligibility, schools have eligibility, there would be an inconsistency there. That was been brought up to me by several people, which I think you can understand that. We are not opposed to the policies that are being talked about in this bill. I think the one thing, and Scott brought it up and talked about it, that there are policies in place. Most school districts already have them, and so I would encourage you. Let me put it this way: this bill will probably pass. It's going to come out of this committee. It's going to pass on the floor of the Senate as well. 75, was voted in favor of in the House. It will pass. Could you try to fix it? And that would be my ask. Try to fix it about the things that we've brought up, and go to conference committee and work it out. But we're not opposed to parents supporting their kids and guiding the education of their children. That's not a question. But we are concerned about some of the ramifications it could have, and they've been pointed out. So I'll stand for questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Lauren Tice Miller, Director of Government Relations and Elections, Kansas National Education Association. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I am Lauren Tice Miller, Director of Government Relations and Elections for Kansas NEA, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify today in opposition to House Bill 2236. I want to be clear that Kansas NEA does not oppose parental involvement. In fact, one of the resolutions adopted by our membership that guides our organization specifically relates to parental involvement. I have included the full language of that resolution in my written testimony, so I won't read it to you. Additionally, of the 6 core values of our organization, one is partnership. We believe partnerships with parents, families, community members, and other stakeholders are essential to public education and student success. But we believe it should be just that, a partnership, and that partnerships are most effective when they come with mutual respect and a shared goal. We oppose House Bill 2236 for many reasons. First, we believe it doesn't afford parents with anything that they don't already have. In my written testimony, I have included a list of 12 board policies that exist today that apply directly and indirectly to parents' rights to direct their child's education or even object to materials. And work with educators to come up with alternative assignments. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, and local boards elected by district parents and patrons have the authority to establish or adopt policies to meet the needs of their districts. And if the district parents and patrons don't believe that their districts are being met or their needs are being met, they can vote. Further, as I mentioned, it's not uncommon for educators to make alternative arrangements for students and work to help them meet the requirements of the course. We also believe that the intentional vagueness of this bill creates a slippery slope of unintended consequences. Under this bill, students who work hard, complete all of their assignments, and successfully fulfill academic requirements must compete for spots to participate in activities, earn academic awards, and receive scholarships alongside their peers who may have been exempted without any academic consequences. Moreover, we question how this will not come back to be used against our educators and our schools. Let's say we have a group of students who have been withdrawn from an assortment of courses and educational programs throughout their academic career. They're allowed to graduate. If they perform poorly beyond graduation, how will that be used? Will their parents' decisions in directing their education be factored in, or will it simply be used as a data point and reflection of the performance of our teachers and the schools that these children have graduated from? Kansas NEA believes this bill is not about parents' rights, but instead it's just one more mechanism to erode public trust in our public schools. An educated and well-trained workforce is essential to a healthy economy and a bright future for our students, and the collaboration between students, educators, and caregivers is a critical element of their success. And we invite legislators to join us in cultivating those partnerships, and we urge you to oppose House Bill 2236. And I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. Last, we have Efren Taylor. Welcome to our committee.
Thank you. My name is Efren. I've been a Kansas resident for all my life. Obviously, I'm pretty young, so I've been a student as well. The main problem that I have with this bill is its vagueness. It would essentially just allow parents to withdraw their student just because they didn't like something in the course without any academic punishment for the student. I'm a huge fan of saying things plain. We know the intention of this bill. There are a bunch of people who think that in our public schools, we're teaching people to be gay, we're teaching them to hate white people, we're teaching them about Marxism or communism or all of those things. And there was a time in history where we were trying to integrate public schools, and teachers were trying to do things like Black history. And many parents opposed this, and oftentimes they would use their religious books to justify it. And we ignored those parents. We moved on, and thank God that we did. I'm asking us to do the same thing today. Now, of course, we know there are a bunch of ways locally parents can stay involved in their students' education. But now we're facing a fight protecting education. People seem to think the purpose of education is to appease the parents. It's not. It's to raise kids to be better than what their parents were. And bills like this fundamentally go against that. I mean, imagine how slowly we would have progressed if we just listened to those parents, allowed them to just take their children out because they didn't like the teaching of Black history. And now they're trying to do the same thing with LGBTQ history. For these reasons, I strongly oppose this bill and encourage you all to do the same. And I'll stand by for questions.
Thank you for your testimony, and I'm sorry I mispronounced your first name, but thank you for being here. Committee, what questions do we have? Sorry, still struggling. What questions do we have for opponents? We'll start with Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my question's for Lauren. So I was struck today by Amy, our Lansing Vice President of School Boards, what she shared, because she's both pro-public schools but also bringing forward solutions, because she recognizes that people are choosing to go places other than public schools, and that was really refreshing. And so I guess my question for you is, what are some solutions?
You know, I think one of the solutions is there's always room for improvement on communication. And I know, if you read through the list of policies that I've included in my testimony, there are all kinds of ways for parents to get involved. At all kinds of different levels. In most cases, school districts put together a curriculum committee, and then once they have some ideas, they then take those to site councils and get feedback from parents, and there are educators involved in that. There are parents, if they're brand new to a district, they may not know when that meeting is held. They may not know that they're welcome to attend. So I certainly think there could be improved communication on when are those meetings held? Are parents truly invited? How do they provide that public input? There are PTO meetings, PTA meetings, all of those kinds of things that they could still be involved in. I think there's ways that the procedures, again, comes back to communication. There are ways right now for parents to go to the school district and review curriculum at the district office, but it may require a little more effort because there are copyright issues. We can't just make copies and scan them in and email them over. So they may have to get in their vehicle, drive to their district central office and review it. So it takes a little bit of time and effort, but again, I think one of the main solutions that I would recommend is we're all human, we can all improve on our communication.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a couple of questions. I think my first one is for, is it Ephraim? Ephraim, thank you for being here. And I do appreciate when we get young people involved in the legislative process. So thank you for being here. I do, though I am a little concerned about some of the things you said. So I want to ask you, you made a statement, something to the effect of, we need to raise kids to be better than their parents.
Yeah.
So who's responsible for raising the kids and whose kids are they?
Well, the parents are responsible for raising the kids, but education, our school districts are responsible for teaching them education. They went to school to get a degree in that. And they do a bunch of research to determine, what's actually not like morally right, but, what are the facts about the world? And then we send our schools to do that.
Follow up, if I may, Madam Chair. You said earlier also something to the effect of, we ignored parents' biblical values, and I thought it was ironic because I believe you said, thank God we did.
Yeah, it
So
was
you
actually
said
meant
that
as a joke.
Teachers then, the implication of that being that if you're not teaching morals and you want to ignore the parents' wishes at school, how do you separate that in your mind?
I actually don't think that people often think that we're opposed to teaching any morals in schools. I don't think that has to be the case. We taught about racial integration, racial equality. We teach kids in kindergarten that sharing is caring. Now, I think the problem is we start to teach about like all these things are good. Those are all moral statements. We agree it's okay to do that. It's just that when LGBTQ people come up and we say it's okay to be gay, or we want to teach LGBTQ history, that is suddenly a problem.
Thank you. Thank you, Ephraim. I appreciate that. You may be surprised that all of the things that you said are biblical principles. I do have a question, though, for someone else, Madam Chair, or whoever of the opponents would like to answer. Recently, there's been quite a bit in the news about a Wichita 259 policy. And part of that is a teacher training document that says the following, and I'd like just an opponent to address what's the solution when this happens in schools, if not for a bill like this. Quote, to not use the preferred pronouns in our names can equate to discrimination. To allow a parent's wishes to not use the student's preferred pronouns and or names is to allow yourself, talking to teachers, to be deputized to discriminate. This is not acceptable. This is a 259 teacher training document. And I would like an opponent to explain to me when that's being taught to our teachers that obviously is hiding critical information regarding their child from the parent, what's the solution?
No, I would like to have Lauren and Scott weigh in on that, please.
I'm actually I haven't seen the story or the policy that you're referencing, but I know that that is not our advice. KNEA has never given our educators that advice. And in fact, our hard advice is never to hide anything from parents.
Madam Chair, if I may, then what I haven't seen is KNEA or any organization coming out, you say in your document, we value partnerships with parents. We want parents involved in their children's school. Yet there's no condemnation when this is documented policy going on in a school. And I just think it would be nice to see that for a change.
I will absolutely take that back to our leadership.
Please do, and please get back with us on what the public action is on that from your leadership. Scott, can you please weigh in?
I'm afraid I really didn't understand it. And so, I'm kind of like.
What don't you understand?
I didn't understand. When you read it, I was kind of having trouble following what the actual policy was. I'm sorry.
Please repeat it.
Happy to, Madam Chair. The training policy says, and I quote, to not use the preferred pronouns and or names can equate to discrimination. To allow a parent's wishes to not use the student's preferred pronouns and/or names is to allow yourself, meaning teachers, to be deputized to discriminate. This is not acceptable.
I got it now. So they're telling the teachers that if you don't use the pronouns, that's, okay. I would just have to investigate that further. I'm kind of, what he said about, parents need to be smarter than their kids. That's what's going through my mind right now.
I do think that KNEA and KASB, and I'm going to say particularly KASB, and I'm going to pull in Jim with USA, the issue of school districts saying, teachers, you are not going to inform parents, that is not something new of just this school year. That's been going on, and concerns have been raised about that. And we heard that even last year in testimony. So you really do need to get a hold of this issue. You need to get some of this documentation. You do need to start paying attention to what it is that parents are saying at school board meetings when they're being told to be quiet and sit down and stop talking, because this is going on. And as two organizations, and I'm going to say particularly with Kansas Association of School Boards, but also USA, I mean, you are funded through school district money for that membership, and you have to be a part of this. And so you know that this bill passed out of the House, but have you worked with the proponents on this language? Or is the language that you read to us today the first time that it's been exposed?
The language
The language that you put in there, and I'm gonna tag that with, has the KNEA, KASB, or USA ever gone after KSHA? Because right now, to be a KSHA student, you're only required to attend 5 or more courses per semester. Students are allowed to fail courses semester after semester. So when we talk about learning loss, we're saying all you have to do is attend 5 courses and you can still compete in extracurricular. So have you ever gone after KSHA for those low standards as far as learning for those students? I will get to you. I see your hand.
Let me first apologize. I'm just not familiar with what you brought up, and I will definitely try to get back some information to you all about that. The issue on KSHA, I have not.
Okay. So for those 3 groups, KNEA, KSB, and what I think of as USA, and we also heard from PTA about the concern about learning loss. It should have started with KSHA, as far as that is in their policy. For a student to be eligible to compete, they only have to be attending 5 courses per semester, only have to pass 5 courses to continue to compete. And that is not going to lead to a well-educated student that would eventually graduate.
I don't know what KSHA's policy is, I'm sorry. And there was a comment earlier about, what solutions, and I think we had some language here, and we feel like that would be a solution. We were neutral on the bill last year that finally came up, so
Okay.
I mean, we are trying to find some common ground.
Well, you're asking us to split the baby, and my question was, have you worked with the proponents on this language, or is this the first they're hearing of the language in this hearing?
I'm not certain.
Okay. Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question to Senator Erickson's comment that I felt was kind of an administrative, but how does that relate to curriculum, and how would that be addressed in this bill?
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It reaffirms the parent's right to direct the moral upbringing of their child, and when the school is not respecting that, that's what is addressed in this bill.
Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for Scott. Do most school boards in the state of Kansas, when they're putting together their board policies for their district, do they rely on you guys to put together a lot of their policies?
I believe they do, yes.
So there's a very alarming trend going on in the state of Kansas right now where a lot of school boards are starting to adopt policies that are restricting parents to testify and speak before their boards. For example, in my home, my district, or sorry, in my Senate district, we have school districts that have very different policies. We have some districts that have the old policy, which has been the traditional policy where if a parent or someone shows up that day, they can submit their name, sign up, and they can address the board with whatever concern or question they might have to ask the board. And now we've seen the boards are trying to, it appears, censor parents because we have boards who are saying you have to apply days in advance and then you will be either granted permission to do that or you'll be redirected to talk to an administrator or somebody on the side. I find that very, very alarming that we're trying to, I'm curious what the motivation is behind that and if the KSB is advising school districts to do that.
I mean, we're not advising anyone to censor parents. I think KSB policies are basically aimed at being able to run an efficient board meeting and to get comment from the public on issues before the board.
So, sorry, Madam Chair. So to your understanding, there's been no directives by the KSB to school boards on changes to board policy in terms of public input and communication?
I mean, I think we update our policy handbook like twice a year, and we have lots of policies, and I mean, we have no policies that seek to censor anyone. Our policies are aimed at the board meeting being efficient and being able to hear from the public on issues that are before the board.
Final question coming from Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sorry, I did not see your hand.
Just
Okay, you asked a question.
okay.
I didn't see Senator Petty, but I did see Senator Gossage, so.
I'll make mine quick.
Okay.
It's more of a comment, and that is that as I look around our committee, the majority of us have taught in the classroom and or been administrators in the classroom. The majority of us are parents. And I know when I taught, I relished talking to my parents. I really enjoyed talking to them. We loved their kids. We had a mutual love for their children. And it's sad to me that we've come to a state where parents feel like they can't trust what's going on at school, and they're like, all I want to know is what's going on. Do I have an opportunity to opt out of this? I can sadly recall where a fellow teacher had said to some of us, if a parent comes and asks for this, just tell them I don't have any more. They're probably not going to like it. And it was a sex education program for fifth graders. And I think parents should have been aware of what is going on with that. And if a parent asked me about it, I said, I would go to him. I believe there are some other materials that you could take home. I cannot lie to a parent. And therefore, that's why I think this bill is needed. Parents just don't know where they stand anymore. And I hope that we can bridge this divide. And I hope that, you know, we as parents and as teachers can come together and work for the betterment of the children. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Petty, then Senator Sykes.
Thank you. We have testimony here from Judy Dede with Game On from Kansas about that overwhelmingly there's strong support from parents for public education. We got kind of sidetracked here talking just about KSHA, but I thought it was very telling that when we look at that section lines 15 to 17, where no student's academic records shall be adversely affected by withdrawing from a class or educational program pursuant to this section, I would be concerned about how that impacts whether my student is then going to make the National Honor Society, or whether my child would then be able to be recognized by their GPA, as opposed to a student who's now not completed the classwork that was required in the required courses. So I think I appreciate the language that's been provided for us by Scott Rothschild to look at this, because this does leave it open to being very discriminatory to our students that are doing all of the work, and also to the students that are actually asking for some sort of optional way, but maybe opening the door to others not doing anything at all.
Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Scott. In reference to Senator Blasey's question, I think it's a great problem that we have more people engaged and showing up at those Board of Education meetings. But could you comment of, we sometimes have to limit testimony in committee here or time. Would that be similar to those Board of Education meetings?
I think our boards do limit time and just as you all do, just to keep the meeting going. Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'll be very
I saw
brief.
that look, so you will respond, and then I'm going to respond, and then we will adjourn the meeting, so.
The one difference I would have to say is that parents who are requesting to speak to their board are being denied that permission. That's the difference between here and state school board or local school boards.
I appreciate that. For the audience and for the committee, the reason I asked if that information had been shared with the proponents, what I'm trying to have us model as a committee is what we are wanting to happen with our school boards, our school employees, and our parents, that they're going to work together. And so that's why, since this is a different bill from last year, it's very similar. Since there was a hearing in the House and then a vote before the bill came to the Senate, did the sides come together with proposed language? And there's not any clarification that the opponents actually shared that language with proponents. So if we're going to model best practices, I suggest that the opponents get together with the proponents. Now, committee, you were shared minutes. I need a motion to approve the minutes. So moved from Senator Gossage, second from Senator Dietrich. We are adjourned.